And then he says, cry woe, the world's lost voices wail, yet conquers the eternal good at last. Yes, we might say, oh miserable, how sad, how pitiful this whole creation, this whole world, this whole life of ours. We might be seeing all the while, but the eternal will, the eternal good doesn't care about your cry because it has to conquer all that thing and move forward. Yet conquers the eternal good at last. We may blame this miserable life, but finally it is the good which will really establish itself in this creation. Now, this cry woe is again a phrase which is reminiscent of what I have been telling you. Sri Aurobindo has used in Savitri in number of places phrases from Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. This is akin to that cry woe, cry woe. Now, the phrase here is, I think, let me see. Yeah. See, the character in Pilgrim's Progress, Christian, he is one who is making progress, moving from phase to phase of life in his pursuit of the divine city or whatever you call it, you see, the city of God. He's preaching that. And he's meeting all kind of obstacles, all kind of difficulties he's facing here. On one occasion, while he is on his pursuit, he is misled by adverse forces. The vital elements are there and they can easily mislead you. So he is misled. And he says then, woe is me, woe is me, I am undone. Because of these evil forces, I am undone. I cannot really make progress. And then later on, of course, he get the angelic support, guidance, and he is put on the right path, you see. But this is a phrase, where woe is me, for I am undone. Cry woe, the world's lost voices wail, yet conquers the eternal good at last. So, in other words, he says that although I do see a heavy shadow floating above the name of Satyavan, it is meant for some eternal good. That heavy shadow is meant for some eternal good. It is in the waiting. And it is that shadow which is going to lead you to immortality. To immortality. Death is a road to immortality, yet conquers eternal good at last. In other words, although Ashwapati has an idea now of what is going to happen, but he does not know the exact details. He sees in a general sense that there is something ominous, something calamitous, something unhappy involved in the union of Satyavan and Savitri. And what is exactly involved in that, of that he has no knowledge. The details are not known to him. The general impression is there of that kind, but the working details, yes, this is going to happen, and therefore I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. That thing he doesn't have, that knowledge. That knowledge will come from Narad, from Narad. Cry woe, the world's lost voices quail, yet conquers the eternal good at last. So, well, this is not really addressed to Savitri, this statement. What was addressed to Savitri was this, Well hast thou done. I approve the choice. And to some extent, if this is all, is not required. The rest of his statement is addressed to people that are around. Narad to his wife and of course to Savitri in the palace hall. You see. They are kind of talking openly about the events. You see. Death is our road to immortality, all that thing. Then might the sage have spoken, but the king in haste broke out and stayed the dangerous word. He has a definite perception that Narad is going to speak the dangerous word. He is going to speak the dangerous word. And he says, please, 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 keep quiet. Don't utter it. Hold it back. You see. You see. Then might the sage have spoken, but the king in haste broke out and stayed the dangerous word. He has already seen the whole thing, that intuition. And he addresses to Narad, O singer of ultimate ecstasy, O singer of ultimate ecstasy, the last happiness, the finest happiness, you are the singer of that joy or that happiness. He is addressing him, O singer of ultimate ecstasy. Now, this is something very significant, very perceptive also. He is addressing singer, of course, because he is singer of, he has been singing and he is a singer of all that thing. But he says of ultimate ecstasy. Now, this ultimate is a very crucial word here. Here, ultimate is the best kind of ecstasy, unsurpassable ecstasy. You are the singer of unsurpassable ecstasy. That is what it would mean, ultimate. In the normal context, it would mean the unsurpassable ecstasy. Absolutely, absolute ecstasy, you see. Nothing beyond that. That is what the ultimate ecstasy would mean. But here, it also means you are talking about the ecstasy which will come ultimately. In the meanwhile, we may have to suffer, we may have to face difficulties, problems, and that kind of a thing. Yes, yes, we'll have to go through the whole process, and ultimately the ecstasy might come. So that ultimate has that double sense here, you see, the unsurpassable ecstasy and the ecstasy which will eventually be realized. It also means eventually which will be realized. Now, whether Ashwati is meaning the ecstasy which is eventually realized or the ultimate ecstasy, I think we can make a choice between the two. I would say he is talking contextually, Ashwati. And therefore, he already says death is, etc., that thing is, etc. So, ultimately, the good is there bound to be. So, eventually, it will be all happiness and all lived forever in happiness. That is how the story ends, you see. The children's story ends like that, you see. Ultimate ecstasy. So I would rather put it in that sense. Although he is also the singer of the final ecstasy or the ultimate ecstasy, the absolute ecstasy, you see. Lend not a dangerous vision to the blind. Now this is again grammatically is very beautiful phrase. Dangerous vision to blind. Yes, we are all blind. We don't know what is stored for us tomorrow. We have no knowledge of it. We can't see that thing. In other words, Narad is able to see what is going to happen tomorrow. He has that vision. He is not blind. We are blind as human creatures. And therefore, to us, do not give that dangerous vision. Dangerous because we don't know what is really involved in that. And dangerous it can be in the sense that if you are not capable of understanding the power which is there behind the events, then it can become calamitous. If you are foretold about something which is going to be bad, you may immediately collapse. You may immediately collapse, you see. If you are foretold, if somebody is told, look, you fellow, tomorrow you're going to die. You see, the fellow, what will do? Will collapse, let him see. You see, like that. Dangerous vision to the blind means blind means here in the sense that you are not prepared to accept the implications of what you are going to tell in that sense. Because by native light thou hast seen clear. By native light thou hast seen clear. Ashwapati sees only the shadow floating and chased by a stupendous light. But what the details are there behind it, of that he has no idea. But Narad, by his very position, being up there by that light, he immediately sees what is happening, what is going to happen, what had happened. In other words, thou hast seen clear, you have Trikala Drishti, the vision of all the three times, what is going to happen, what had happened. You have the vision of the Trikala, of the three divisions of time, the past, the present, the future, and you have seen it clearly. You have that thing. I don't have that thing. Therefore, I am blind. I am blind from that point of view. I don't have Trikala Drishti. Therefore, I am blind. And if I don't have that Trikala Drishti, what is the use of giving that dangerous vision to me? Because by native right thou hast seen clear. Impose not on the mortal's tremulous breast the dire ordeal the foreknowledge brings. Demand not now the Godhead in our acts. Impose not on the mortal's breast the dire ordeal of the foreknowledge. The ordeal of the foreknowledge is to be given only to whom who can stand up to that, who has that capacity to accept the foreknowledge of doom of tomorrow. It is not meant for ordinary people. It is a tremendous, as the mother says, it is a tremendous act of grace that the future is kept sealed from us. It is an act of grace that it is kept hidden from us, because we would not have been able to respond to it. We had not psychologically, spiritually prepared ourselves for that kind of thing. So that foreknowledge to the mortal could be very dangerous. Demand not now the Godhead in our acts. Here are not happy peaks of heaven names roam. He is now describing the nature of this creation here. We don't have here those wonderlands, dreamlands, where we can move easily. Are not happy peaks, the heaven names roam, or Kailash, or Vaikuntha's starry stair. Kailash, that is the heaven of Shiva. Vaikuntha, that is the heaven of Vishnu. Vishnu's paradise, Shiva's Kailash. Now, these spellings, Kailash and Vaikuntha, these are the early spellings of Shrivandu. Now we'll say K-A-I-L-A-S-H, Kailash, and Vaikuntha, V-A-I-K-A-N-T-H-A, star is there. Now, he used some of these spellings. See, in fact, even earlier drafts of Savitri, he used to write Savitri as Savitri, Savitri, Thri, Dumat Sena, Satyavan, Suthavan, Satyavan, Savitri. Now he says that gives you a kind of a softness to the utterance. For the English ear, Vaikuntha, Kailasha, they look harsh. They sound harsh. But Vaikuntha, Kailash, you see, I mean, he is giving you kind of a rounded description of that. And to remove that harshness of the Sanskrit names, words, he uses this. That is why he used to say Savitri, to make it a little soft. Abrupt jackhills only the mighty climb are here, where few dare even think to rise. If few dare even think to rise. Now, he is of course saying that we are living in a harsh world and it is difficult to climb these mountains here. We get wounded, we stumble and fall constantly. But it also says that few can dare to rise. Possibly in that few is also included Savitri. She is also a part of that few. Few dare even think to rise. Far voices call down from the desert rocks. Chill, slippery, precipitous are the paths. He is telling it to Narad, who knows all these things already. But yeah.